Now let's dive deep into this big LGBTQ story for today. I'm Bobby Hyun, and let's queer up the worldview. Hungary's parliament filled with rainbow smoke as law banning Pride passes. Protests erupted in Hungary's capital Budapest following the passage of a law banning Pride events and allowing the use of facial recognition software to track attendees. The nation's largest LGBTQ event, Budapest Pride, thousands took to the streets, blocking the Margaret Bridge over the Danube, while opposition lawmakers set off rainbow smoke bombs in parliament to demonstrate their opposition. Evgeny Belyakov, a Russian citizen living in Hungary, expressed the concerns, saying, quote, "It's quite terrifying, to be honest, because we had the same in Russia. It was building up step by step, and I feel like this is what is going on here. I just only hope there will be more resistance like this in Hungary, because in Russia, we didn't resist on time, and now it's too late," end quote. The law passed with overwhelming support from Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party and the Christian Democrats. Bans attending or hosting events that promote homosexuality if minors might be present. Attendees face fines of around $550 and law enforcement can use facial recognition technology to track participants. This law builds upon Hungary's controversial 2021 child protection law, which restricts queer content aimed at minors. The European Union has condemned the law, calling it discriminatory, while local Pride organizers have labeled it simply fascism. Which is exactly correct. It is exactly fascism. And by the way, a lot of what we have now from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue actually is based off of Viktor Orbán's playbook. He has been invited to speak at CPAC events. He is a very and all the "don't say gay" stuff are based off of what he tried to do. Viktor Orbán has ruled Hungary for now a good portion of decade now. He has been basically, it's now essentially just a authoritarian dictatorship in a velvet glove. They pretend to have elections, he wins anyway. And European Union has been very concerned about that, and they have threatened to cut off funding to, just like Poland was faced with funding cuts when they tried to get a bunch of LGBTQ free zones. Remember that one? I think it was like last year. And EU is like, well, if you want my money, you're not going to have those things. And that worked. And, and Poland also had a dramatic swing to the left after the election, after Law and Justice finally failed. Thank God. And now with Hungary, essentially I'm afraid that would be the next step that Americans would do, or at least in red states. Ron DeSantis saying that, we're all going to ban Pride parades. And especially given with states with Republican supermajorities, that might pass. Although, of course, there's the question of free speech. And if Skokie is any guide, that would probably fail constitutionally.
Well, hopefully. I've found that the rule of law is more of a joke than it is a policy in this country. Young people today, they go to law school. I'm like, are you sure? You sure what you're learning is of any youth
we
anymore?
Need young lawyers.
So,
yes.
But if the rule book keeps getting ripped up, I don't know how you navigate that.
Yeah, well, again, I've mentioned on prior broadcasts, we need to take our talents, I mentioned certainly in the arts, but our technical folks in our LGBTQ communities and allies to make sure that artificial intelligence, these things that we're talking about now with facial recognition, stay in check. We also need to make sure we encourage people in our communities to run for office to counter all this craziness. Certainly the idea of attending something and having to alter one's appearance so that one doesn't get prosecuted is scary. Or outright not enjoying the right to attend a parade or be in a parade to celebrate who we are. Because then you say, okay, what's next? Who are they going to come after? And of course we go back to the example of basic rights in the Holocaust.
The facial recognition software is, I think, probably the most frightening part of that story, Bobby. Both because of just the sort of like Big Brother look, but also it's actually highly unproven technology. Corporations love to sell all this AI investigative technology. It doesn't work. Well, the New York City subways, AI was going to see if you had a gun, and they stopped hundreds of people in a month. And do you know how many guns they found?
None.
0. That's how good this tech is. So I look at this, and to the straight people in Hungary who watch this show for some reason, I would say to you why you should still oppose this. How do you know that AI isn't going to accidentally think you're that other person at the parade?
And also, well, also
Could have a
same
doppelganger.
Right? Or the way it looks at it is so kind of, it could put someone that's completely, you would not think looks anything like them. A computer might think looks like them.
Well, I think we're smart enough as a community. We're going to somehow work around that.
Well, I mean, there already talks about basically moving it into an indoor concert thing where people under 18 cannot be there. That skirts the rule, but that means that the youth of Hungary is never going to be able to experience Pride until they're of age, and they are already no longer being taught LGBTQ history or any of that stuff. And Hungary is a very conservative country where the Pride are more of akin to the traditional Pride we have had versus the bright and shiny Pride we have now.
And I've had friends who raised children, gay and lesbian, who brought their children to Pride, and they were destined to be who they were, whether they identified later as a lesbian, gay, or trans, or they were part of the cis community. That's who they are, but it didn't damage them.
Information never damages anyone.
No.
Information and education and exposure to other people from different cultures and identities, that's what they're trying to prevent. Conservatives want to conserve the traditional order by essentially erasing identities off the map and make sure that, you'll be treated, anyone who is not traditional identity are treated as alien, hostile.
It's important to remember that fascism isn't about preserving. It's about destroying and creating a new narrative that must be followed, and anything that deviates from that narrative has to be destroyed. It's it's a weirdly, perversely different thing.
And again, looking at some irony, I know people who are, I don't talk to them really too much anymore, but they've chosen that path, and that they say that people in our community on the left are looking to be fascists when it's the furthest thing from the truth.
Exactly. I mean, well, whatever, they always cling to like National Socialist, like that. Yeah. So is like DPRK. So, but
that we're going to be grooming their children because that's what we're paid to recruit
every
and get
time
bucks to do.
Yeah.
Every accusation is a projection.
Absolutely.
Every accusation is an admission. I mean, how many drag queens have they arrested for, crimes against minors versus how many pastors?
Well, you look at the owner of one of the owners of a Chick-fil-A franchise who was arrested for pursuing, I think, a 12-year-old out of state.
Oh, my.
Wow.
Now he's incarcerated. And he was a Trump affiliate.
Of course. That is a big LGBTQ story for today. There is no other queer news, non-profit media platforms like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by subscribing